Welcome to episode 46 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome to the Air Hug Community. I am Judy Arizosa, your host, and I created the Air Hug Community to bring you stories from guests and myself that ultimately help improve the lives of others and boomerang back to improve your life. So we cover all sorts of topics like relationships and personal development, how you see the world, and just behaviors that actually affect yourself and others. So strap in, sit down, welcome, and thank you so much for joining in. Hello, everybody. Welcome if this is your first time listening, and welcome back if you are returning, and thank you for joining back in. Today, I had this brainstorm and been thinking about it a lot, especially when I'm around a lot of women. I see this comes up a lot, and we're talking today about accepting compliments with grace. Now, you may not think this is a big deal, but it actually is a big deal. And I want to actually just start with a little, I just got to get this off my chest and share what happened because I was on this really wonky plane flight recently. Okay, so let's remember federal laws, right? At the beginning of a flight, they always talk about the federal laws like smoking and tampering with the smoke detector, right? And all that. And now they also talk about the federal law that talks about wearing a mask is required on all airline flights. It's a U.S. federal law, right? So I was on a flight. It was a Saturday night. It was late. And the details are that I just spent a week with my daughter and son-in-law, and they just had their newborn baby, and I was coming back home. So you can imagine that I was tired, I was anxious, and I was actually missing home and wanting to get back to be with my husband. So there's this woman several rows behind me. So I did not witness this per se, okay? But she was asked by the flight attendant to please put her mask on. So what she did was put her mask on, and as the flight attendant walked past her, she took it off immediately. However, there was another flight attendant that called her out on it and just said, listen, you're going to need to put this mask on. So this launched into a very long ordeal. And although it was several rows behind me, there was a young lady next to me who actually had her phone on speaker, and her friends were sitting, her travel companions were sitting by this person. And so they actually had their phone on speaker, and she had her phone on speaker, so we could kind of hear what was going on. So basically, the woman did put her mask back on. It didn't cover her nose, but she wouldn't cooperate. So at this point in time, the sky bridge was already retracted, the door was closed, and our flight was marked as having taken off. And I actually texted my husband to tell him we're not taking off, and he's like, you already took off. I'm like, no, we didn't really. We just closed the sky bridge and closed the door, which apparently that's when flights begin. So after this long ordeal and flight attendants going back and forth, they put the sky bridge back, connect our door, open it up, and security comes on. And they go down and speak to this woman. I counted 4 different security people going down and talking. And as far as we could tell, there was no change. And we're just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. Now our flight is 30 minutes late. And the head flight attendant gets on the PA system and says, everybody get your belongings. Everyone on this plane needs to deplane. Everyone. So, okay, we all, in the order that we're supposed to deplane, front to back. And apparently this person does not get off the plane. So we're all at the gate now waiting with our belongings. And the Port Authority police come. We're in LaGuardia Airport, that way in New York. And they actually, 4 of them came and escorted her off. To say that the plane was full of angry people would be an understatement. There were lots of commentary going on. There was lots of assumptions going on. And I was not happy, obviously, but I was thinking, how can I get through this situation with grace? And I mean, honestly, I just wanted to go home, right? See my husband. It was late. It was hot. By the way, the Uber ride on the way to the airport didn't have air conditioning and it was 90 degrees. So that's kind of the frame of mind I was in. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, how can I give a little bit of grace to this person and to anyone? So my biggest actually compassion was with the flight crew who were marvelous, right? But I started to think about this woman. I'm like, she wants to go home. So I'm like, okay, let's see. I was like not making up excuses, but just trying to think of like why she might act this way. Maybe she has a mental illness. Maybe she is on some meds for maybe a mental illness that she has and they're not dosed correctly. Maybe she's just a drug addict and is stoned out on something. I don't know. But I was just thinking to myself, like, why would anyone in their right mind, right, in their right mind, want to ground an entire plane full of people? And by the way, she was not allowed black on that flight. And of course, her reaction was, you can imagine what her reaction, but it was anger and it was not good. I was prepared for the worst, but, and there, while she was verbally loud, there was no physical anything. And I do have to applaud the police because they handled it with very calm conversation. And they eventually, not right away, but eventually escorted her out. So thank you to the Port Authority Police. Thank you to the flight crew that was part of Delta Airlines on that flight. But I want to move on to like, what is grace? And so I often think that, I hate to say things happen for a reason, but I do believe that situations can occur that will help us later on. So I'm going to back up a little bit. A few weeks back, I was out walking my dogs and I ran into a friend who was out doing her gardening and I hadn't seen her in quite a long time. And certainly hadn't seen her in like a tank top, but now, right, it's warmer weather. So anyway, she had this really interesting tattoo on her arm. And I asked her if I could see it. I'm like, well, I don't remember you having a tattoo. Is that new? And she was very happy to show me. And it said, I will hold myself to a standard of grace, not perfection. So it was very interesting. Both she and I have been involved in fitness for quite some time. And, you know, people who are involved in fitness, especially competitors, can get really caught up in perfection versus being, you know, giving yourself grace. And I also started to read about this a lot because I was really interested in the fact that she would go that far to put a tattoo on her arm. And I found another quote about grace that really spoke to me. And it says, grace is the face that love wears when it meets imperfection. And I thought, oh, how lovely is that? And then I wanted to take it one step further because I work with a lot of women. You know, I do things with women. I golf with women. And one thing I notice that by and large, when women are given a compliment, it's very hard for them to accept a compliment with grace. And in fact, most of the time, by and large, I will see women make an excuse for a compliment or a situation to justify it as if they weren't worthy of receiving it in the first place. And so I would like to say this, don't do that. Okay, number one, it's very awkward to be the giver of the compliment and have someone just undercut it, right? It's actually, number two, insulting to the giver. And number three, it's weird for them to have to sit there and listen to your excuses. But the worst part about this, actually all of these are rotten, is that it sends a message to our brain that we are unworthy by not accepting a compliment. So I want to talk about another airplane story, and this one took place over 30 years ago, but it still sticks in my mind. So here's the scenario. Once again, I'm coming home. This time I'm with my husband, and I'm on a plane, and I'm significantly pregnant. And as it was just happened to be interesting, but there was a woman in the row across from us who was also significantly pregnant. And I'm pregnant for my third child at this point. She has two young children with her. And I just noticed throughout the flight how wonderful her kids behaved. And so when we got up to deplane, I said to her, your children behaved absolutely wonderfully on this flight. What a joy that must be. And she said, thank you very much. Yes, they did. And I totally agreed with her. And now I didn't think that she was bragging. I actually, remember, I initiated the compliment. She didn't like ask for it. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? She accepted that compliment. And I've thought about this a lot over the years because I don't know. And I do realize, she's as tired as I was, right? We're about the same amount pregnant or, kind of eyeballing it. But she had her two young kids with her too. And I'm like, she's exhausted and these kids did a great job. And she very gracefully accepted that compliment. And it has always stuck with me. Like, what a wonderful thing that was. So years later, we were on a vacation in Hilton Head. And by now we have 4 kids. And I think it's a little fuzzy in my memory, but I'm guessing they range from maybe like 11 to 3 in age, something like that. They were, a handful and little. And so we wanted to go to what I like to call a white linen restaurant. And we, told our kids what to expect. And I came up with this little idea. And I said, I got an idea, guys. How about if I said, don't say anything about it, but if you try to behave so well that you earn a compliment from someone in the restaurant who just happens to notice how well you might be behaving. And they were like, oh, all right. So they did. They actually, I was pretty proud of them. There was one very comical moment, but they behaved very, very well. Okay, I just have to share the comical moment. So we had ordered crab claws as an appetizer. And so my husband was helping, and I can't remember if it was my husband or my oldest child, but we're using like those claw crackers, nutcracker things to crack out, crack the shell and get the crab claw out when all of a sudden a crab claw went flying and landed on the table next to us. And of course there were people at that table and everybody just burst out laughing. So that was the one little like very unexpected like, oh my gosh. And of course I think our kids were like, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and we just started laughing, and so did the people at the other table, and it turned out okay. But I will say that when we got up to leave after our meal, lo and behold, the kids actually did receive a compliment on their behavior. And I didn't say anything, and my husband didn't say anything other than thank you very much. And so that also has stuck with me like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of them. They did it. They got a compliment. And I just wanted to thank the people because these people had no idea that we had kind of coached our kids a little bit. So here's the thing. When you accept a compliment with grace versus with excuses, a lot of different things happen. All right. So within your brain, there's an entirely different scenario going on. And remember, your brain is so literal, right? So if you think it's funny and you're making excuses and not giving yourself credit, your brain is not giving you credit either. But if you accept a compliment with wholehearted grace, here's what happens, all right? 4 little things happen, and actually they're not all that little. They are significant and they are pivotal. Number 1 is accepting that compliment with grace reinforces your worthiness, all right, to your brain. And number 2, it helps you to make future better choices. So you've just made a good choice and your brain is like, okay, see how this goes. All right, let's keep that in mind for next time. Number 3, when you accept a compliment with grace, it cultivates more self-love. So you're like, yes, thank you. Actually, I did, behave very well at the table. or something like that, just using the example from my kids. And number 4, it actually reinforces your desired behavior, because you've just maybe done a desired behavior, whatever it was, and someone noticed and complimented it. So it actually reinforces your desired behaviors that actually help to align with your why. And so actually you're going to think about whatever led you to that compliment. You're going to want to do that again and again and again, and it does reinforce and help things. Even if someone compliments you on, I don't know, anything, any behavior that you can think of. Maybe they'll say, I don't know, obviously looks are a big one. Geez, you're looking really good, and you're thinking, thank you very much. Yeah, I've been eating really well, and it's going to reinforce your behavior to continue to eat well. And so the opposite, I used to be on this forum. I wasn't actually intending on bringing this up, but this also sticks in my mind. Before social media, for those of you who remember, there were things like chat forums, right? You could go online and you would go to forums and you would have conversations with people about specific topics. And so I was on this fitness forum, and within that forum there were several different conversations that were threads. There were actually categories. And so one was about eating healthy. And, everyone had their own definition at the time. And this was probably the 90s. So I don't even remember what my MO for eating was. I'm sure it was low fat, because I held on to that for a long time. But anyways, there was always a woman in that who would, at least she said she was a woman, who would get on, and her commentary would be to put herself down. Not even accept compliments with grace, but to put herself down. And sometimes if someone would compliment, like we would actually share our food diaries. And it was just an accountability thing. It was a fun thing for a while, whatever, at the time. But if she would have like an interesting food diary and someone complimented her, she would discount the compliment. And then people would feel like obligated to like convince her that, no, wow, those are great food choices. It sounds delicious. Did you do this? Did you do that? She really had awesome adjectives. Like me, I would put down like apple. And she would put something down like diced pear. And I'm like, oh, wow. Whatever. Just like she was a lot more descriptive with her adjectives. And I was a lot more like, it is what it is. But anyways, and she would always negate her accomplishments. And after a while, I have to tell you, after a while, I had to stop going to that forum, because I felt like I was obligated to respond with something to lift her up. Not that I didn't want to lift her up, but how could anyone be so negative all the time? I mean, she was negative. The food diary was just an example. But sometimes she would initiate a conversation and get on about how frumpy she felt and how, her workout was awful, and she only burned, I don't know, X amount of calories, because she would wear one of those things. And it was always, I think she was like fishing for reinforcement from people, but she did it in a way that made us all feel awkward. And I almost felt like it was insulting to us, the givers of the compliment. So just keep that in mind. I think, grace is very interesting. And when we talk about giving grace to other people, but we also have to give grace to ourselves. And when we can treat ourselves with grace, right, compassion comes to mind, and we definitely reinforce our worthiness. And, I can't speak to guys too much, but being a woman and working with women for the last over a dozen years, and just, being a girlfriend, having friends, it goes a long way to actually be compassionate with each other and with yourself. And if you think of yourself as one of your best friends versus yourself, a lot of times you're way more likely to be graceful with yourself and to be patient as you would with your friend or with your children. And this is going to help you. Remember, let's go through this again. It's going to reinforce your worthiness. It's going to help you make future better choices. Yay. It's going to cultivate more self-love. And it's going to be a feed-forward cycle, right? You will reinforce your desired behaviors that align with your why. And so I was so excited to talk about this today because it's the little things, that we do that make a difference in our journey. And also, this is a classic example of something that improves our life and also improves the lives of others. So I want to thank you for listening. As always, it's my privilege to have you listen to this. And if you know someone who you think could benefit from this conversation, do them a favor. Take a screenshot of this and text it to them. Post it on your social media. If you post it on Instagram, please tag me at Judy Arizosa. I'll put that in the show notes. And do me another favor. Could you please write a review and subscribe to this podcast if you are an Apple user? And the reason I'm telling you this is because this really helps us to be known. It really helps the Air Hug community to be able to get awesome guests on so that we can cover more topics that will actually help us improve our life and the lives of others. So thank you very much. And remember, we are here every Tuesday with new episodes of the Air Hug Community Podcast. Ta-ta for now. Okay, P.S. one more thing. I have to tell you that I really enjoy reading your reviews, and it just lifts me up. So thank you very much for writing a review. I'll thank you in advance because you're awesome, and I so appreciate hearing your comments. Okay, I lied. I have one more thing, but I think you're really going to want to hear this. If you are ready to up your motivation game, you want to strengthen that motivation muscle, I have something for you. And it's completely a gift from me to you, and it's my Manifesting Motivation Masterclass. And you can listen to it anytime you want. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes. And hey, who doesn't want a little help with motivation? Because from time to time, we all need help with motivation. All right, now for real, ta-ta for now. I'll see you next Tuesday.